Now, the first children of British Islamic State members to be repatriated from Syria have now arrived back in the UK. The children's relatives here asked solicitors to write to the Foreign Office and charities operating in Syria to raise the case of the children who were orphaned while they were in the country. They have now been extracted in an operation involving the Foreign Office and were handed over yesterday. This afternoon, the Prime Minister has said that the government cannot guarantee that they will be able to bring all British children in Syria back home.
I think it's obviously the situation in Syria is very difficult and very dangerous, and I think it's been a great success that some orphaned children have been brought back, but I think it would be, it would be over-optimistic, frankly, to say that we can do it in every single case. The military logistical difficulties involved are very considerable, but what I've said is that where the government can help, then it should help.
I'm joined now by Valerie, Peay, the Director of the International Observatory of Human Rights. Valerie, thanks for coming in. First of all, your reaction to what looks a little bit like a change of policy from the UK government in bringing these children back to the UK today.
Well, I hope it is a change of policy. I think the government was compelled through a wardship case in the High Court to do this. If they've brought back some children, that's a start. But as we know, there's over 60 UK children that are in Syria. We have that number verified from Save the Children. I think we have the opportunity now to really ask the government, it's only 60 children. There are so many children in need of help in Syria, but we can actually do something about these kids.
One thing we do know about the children who've come back is it's understood that they were orphaned while they were in Syria, and as you've alluded to, they then come under the High Court's rule. The High Court has advised the Foreign Office and charities to try and do something about this. Given the possibility that the children who are still in Syria are not orphaned, do you think that is a reason that the UK government might give for not doing the same for them?
If you take this outside Syria, if you said that these were kids who are in a camp somewhere, say, let's say Guatemala, for example, what would we be doing today? We'd be talking about how to bring children, most of whom are under 12. Certainly none of them have been fighters, and none of them deserve to be in the conditions that they're suffering in the camps. The other thing about this is if you think about the timing, we've got a very short window. We've already seen bombing from Turkish incursions, from Syrian incursions. This is not a safe place to be, and we have the opportunity because the government's just proved it today. They can bring 3, they can bring 60, and potentially some more of the families.
You've written a letter to the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, that you've brought in here. It's a follow-up to a previous letter. What questions do you still have for her in this letter?
I think there are an awful lot of families. Certainly, we've worked with grandparents. Their children have been killed. They know that they have grandchildren who are on the ground. Sometimes they're concerned about if they raise their head above the parapet, will relatives have citizenship stripped from them and everything else. I think causing this situation of fear, we have children that need to be rescued, and we shouldn't be sort of messing around with legal terms. We've just done it. We can do it again.
Just looking at some of the countries who have repatriated citizens, and not just children, I was looking through the list. You have the Americans have brought people back, Russia, Uzbekistan, Malaysia, Indonesia. Kosovans have brought people back who were fighting for Islamic State and Islamic State members. Why do you think the United Kingdom are more reticent than these countries to repatriate their citizens?
It's a really good question. I think it's a political question. We've seen a lot of rhetoric around not bringing families back, not bringing fighters back. But ultimately, we have a responsibility. These people are British citizens. The children, certainly, we have responsibility from a legal perspective. But we don't... Our government seems to not want to answer that and to bring these people home. I mean, we have some of the finest repatriation groups here. We have an ability to repatriate these people, but a child under 12 is not a criminal, and they really shouldn't be treated like one. They should be just brought home.
In your letter, and I think on your website, you referenced the UN's Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that, I think, was used in the High Court as something that the United Kingdom government should sort of abide with. Indeed, the UK is a signatory to that convention. Is there a possibility further down the line, if citizens aren't repatriated, that the United Kingdom could be in contravention of international law?
I think you're going to see more and more of this. The High Court judgment has brought a trial case. So what happens next? Are we really going to force families and grandparents who've already lost their children to have to go to the High Court every single time, case by case. I think Save the Children put it very well. The window to rescue these kids is very small. Winter's coming. We've already seen over 300 kids dying of malnutrition, either in the camps or on the way to the camps. Camps are now being bombed. And really the time it would take to go through court just isn't necessary.
What do you know about the governance of those camps or the running of those camps? Who's in charge?
Places like Al-Hol or Roj have private groups that run them. It's very difficult now for certainly groups like Save the Children, who are doing amazing work on the ground. There's curfews in place. The ability at the moment, the Kurdish groups on the ground have been very forthcoming, trying to repatriate people. But will that still be the case if there's more incursions or if the Assad regime goes in there? You might end up seeing British citizens or British children being used as bargaining chips. We don't want that to happen, and we have the opportunity to do something about that right now.
Given that you said that the window for action is quite small, the High Court judge also said that this was a complex and difficult operation to bring these children who have returned to the UK that we mentioned back to the country. Do you know much about the complexity and difficulty of doing so? Because I appreciate you're talking about 50 or 60 children. But if it's a complex and difficult operation, it's not easy, is it?
So from a physical perspective, if you look at Roj, it's less than 2 hours across the border. So I've been in Erbil. I took an easy flight there. I visited camps in Iraq last year. You can get to a camp, you can physically be there in less than 5 hours. So Al-Hol is a bit more difficult. It's a little bit further away, but it's still possible, even with the curfews. So it is tricky from a legal perspective, but as a first step, we could at least negotiate with the Kurdish groups on either side of the border and bring those kids into Erbil. There are prisons in Erbil if you want to bring the families as well and you feel that there's a danger. But I think the rhetoric around the government's voice saying that we can't bring children because there might be a security risk, these kids are under 12, so I don't really buy that at all.
Okay, Valerie, Peay, thank you very much indeed for coming to speak to us. Appreciate your time.
Pleasure.